When we cease to recognize somebody else's rights, that in turn undermines the whole value system that safeguards our own rights as well. When we start dehumanizing the other because we see him as a threat to us, we start dehumanizing ourselves. I know that this picture is rather gloomy, but my intention is certainly not to lower the spirits before the forum even starts. On the contrary, I believe that now more than ever is when we have to fight to uphold our fundamental rights. More than ever, we realize just how much protecting fundamental rights matters for peace in our societies that are going to be ever more diverse. Because fundamental rights are about recognizing and protecting every individual in society. And they are about balancing and reconciling the rights and freedoms we all want to enjoy. One of the elements of modern society sometimes, I also see it in my country, is that we start extrapolating our own personal freedom to such an extent that we are unwilling to see that the person next to you also wants her or his freedoms. That becomes totally unimportant because the only thing that matters is me. More than ever, the respect for fundamental rights depends also on the broader context, on a democracy worthy of the name, on the rule of law upheld in both letter and spirit by the authorities. The rule of law is not something you can change when you think you have the democratic justification to do so. Our societies are built on three pillars: respect for democracy, respect for the rule of law, and respect for human rights. You cannot use one pillar against the other unless you want to weaken the whole building. Democracy not checked by human rights and the rule of law turns into tyranny of the majority. That is a truth that was discovered by John Adams at the end of the 18th century. And it was true then, and it's still true today. This forum could not have come at a more timely moment. And the topics you will be discussing could not be more relevant to the challenges we face. Let me address each one of them in turn. Migration. The refugee crisis has been one of the main factors contributing to the recent rise of populism and xenophobia in our societies. Why? Because it confirms all the fears people have of our inability to perform the service to the community as is necessary as institutions. The refugee crisis, coming on top of all the other challenges, has made people fear that their identity is at stake, that their future is at stake, that their way of life is at stake. The management of the refugee crisis is undoubtedly a major challenge for Europe, the biggest we've ever faced, without any doubt. It puts a strain on several EU countries, and it confronts us with who we are and how we see our future, our societies. It puts our values to the test and sheds light on the way we are capable or incapable of working together in the European Union. That is why we have made the management of the refugee crisis an absolute priority. This is why we have set out in our migration agenda a holistic approach to reforming our migration and asylum system. We need to put fundamental rights at the core of our response. If I look back at the last year, we went from the iconic, emblematic picture of poor little Aylan, drowned beach in Turkey, to the other emblematic event with a completely different reaction of what happened in Cologne on New Year's Eve. And Europe has sort of been swinging from one side to the other between our feeling of solidarity on the one hand and our fear for identity on the other. And we need to strike a good balance between the two. If we fear too much, the process of dehumanizing starts and the refugee becomes a number, not a person. And numbers drowning in the Mediterranean is something we might be able to cope with. but persons drowning in the Mediterranean should always be unacceptable. I know that some fear that we are sacrificing human rights of migrants on the altar of efficient border management. Let me assure you that this is not the case. Increasing our ability to better manage the migration flows has two fundamental aims: to make sure that all those who need protection will receive it, and to avoid loss of life. This includes preventing situations where people put their life and well-being at risk, placing them in the hands of smugglers. Of course, merely better managing our external borders is not enough. We also must reform our asylum system in order to return to a fair and sustainable sharing of responsibility between our member states. And we must offer legal pathways to Europe, including through the resettlement of refugees directly to the EU, thus bypassing the smugglers.